Hey folks, I hope you're keeping well. Firstly, I would like to say how impressed I was with everyone's quilted patchwork tote bags last month. They all looked very neat, well done. With Easter fast approaching, we thought it would be fun to make this month's sew-along an Easter design. The project is the Easter Redwork basket. In this tutorial, we show you the stitch out of the bunny block and the full construction of the Easter basket. Please refer back to our fully photographed instructions on how to complete the remainder of the blocks. Before we begin the stitching process, upload the design onto your machine and hoop up your desired hoop size with cutaway stabilizer. The design can be made in two different size hoops. They are the 4x4 and the 5x5. We made our Easter basket in the 4x4 hoop. Let us begin by placing batting 1 on top of the hoop. Center it the best you can and stitch down. Use your pink thing to keep flat. Once stitched down, remove the hoop from your machine and use applique scissors to trim away the excess batting. Be careful not to cut into the stitching. Return your hoop back to your machine and place fabric A right side up on top of the hoop, covering the batting, stitch down. Now stitch the placement line for the oval. Place fabric B on top of the hoop, right side up, covering the placement line and stitch down. Remove the hoop from your machine and trim the fabric about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching. Once trimmed, embroider the satin stitch around the oval. Embroider the first and second set of leaves. Embroider the bunny. Embroider the eye and then the detail around the eye. Embroider the inside of the ear and the detail on the bunny. Embroider the 2 rosebuds. Embroider the 3 flowers. Embroider the border leaves. Embroider the center of the flowers on the border. Embroider the small flowers and main flowers on both sides of the oval. Once you have completed all the embroidery, remove your block from the hoop. Using a rotary cutter and ruler, trim back the edges of the block to 1/2 inch. Now that you have finished your block, refer to the instructions to see how the remainder of the blocks are made. Now that you have completed the stitch out of the blocks, lay out your blocks on a flat surface and arrange as per the following layout diagram. You can lay out the redwork blocks in any order you prefer. To begin the construction of the basket, start by joining the blocks into rows. Place the first 2 blocks right sides together, pin along one edge, matching up the seams. Make sure the corners line up perfectly. Now take the blocks over to your sewing machine and stitch the 2 together. Remembering to stitch just inside the border already stitched on the blocks so the stitching will not be seen on the right sides later. Continue the same pinning and stitching process to complete the first row of blocks. Once you have joined the blocks into a row, you need to iron open the seams. We use some Sweet Pea cork and PU leather in this design. The PU leather does not like direct heat, so we are using a Sweet Pea applique mat to transfer heat away from the PU leather. Take your time with this process as the seams will be a little bulkier than usual. If you just use fabric, iron the same as normal. Continue this process until you have each horizontal row of blocks joined together. Next, join the horizontal rows to each other by placing the first 2 rows right sides together. Pin along the bottom edge, lining up the seams as you go. Take over to your sewing machine and stitch them together. A trick to help the seams match up is start by stitching over the pinned seams about 1.5 inches. Then when you're happy with the alignment, continue sewing the rest of your blocks together. Remember to stitch just inside the border already stitched on the blocks so the stitching will not be seen on the right sides later. Because we use PU leather for our blocks, our seams are going to be quite thick. To help with this, we're going to cut the fabric out of the seams. Do this for all your seams. Go ahead and iron open the seams now. We are using our Sweet Pea applique mat to transfer some heat away from the PU leather. Take your time with this process as the seams will be a little bulkier than usual. If you just use fabric, iron the same as normal. It will be necessary to press the seam from both the front and the back of the work. To keep a seam open, cool it down rapidly by moving the hot seam to a cold surface, like a bench top or pressing clapper. Continue the same pinning and stitching process until you have each of the horizontal rows joined together. Once joined, trim the edges so they become even. Now let's start on the basket's lining. First, lay the basket's exterior on top of the lining, which is fabric G, right sides together. Lightly pin around the exterior of the basket to keep in place. Then go ahead and cut around the edge of the basket so the lining is the same shape. Hold aside for later. The next step is to lay your basket flat, right sides up on your workspace. Bring in the sides of your basket, section A and B, and match them up together, right sides together. Pin and stitch just inside the border already stitched on the blocks so the stitching will not be seen on the right sides later. Once sewn, your basket will be the wrong side out. Keep it like this. Go ahead and trim the seams. With the bag still the wrong way out, pinch and pin section 1 together, lining up the seams. Refer to the diagram. Start by lowering the machine needle into the corner point and sew a few stitches and then back tack the same number of stitches. Stitch inside the block's border stitching line, which will be a generous 1/2 inch seam allowance. We do not want to stitch past the corner point into the seam allowance, as this will prevent a clean turnout of the intersection. This method is known as stitch to the net. Open out the stitched seams and iron flat. The bottom of your bag should start to look like this. Next, we are going to close the bottom 2 sections. This will be section 3 and 4. For these next 2 seams, we're going to use the stitch to the net method. This will help us open our seam. Next, sew section 3 together with your seams open. Sew to the net. Repeat for section 4. Nice. Now turn the bag out the right way. Use your sewing machine to stitch a 1/2 inch seam all the way around your lining. This will help when stitching the lining together later. Lay your lining flat right side up on your workspace, following the diagram above. Bring in the sides of your lining A and B and match them up together. Pin and stitch a 1/2 inch seam. Once sewn, your lining will be the wrong side out. Keep it like this. Open out the stitch seams and iron flat. With the lining still the wrong way out, pinch, pin and sew section 1 on your sewing machine. Repeat for section 2. Use your scissors to clip the corners so you can open the seam flat and give it a press with the iron. Next, sew section 3 and section 4 together. Iron open the seams. This will help the basket sit flat. We decided to use a piece of webbing for our straps. If you want to make yours from scratch, refer back to our written instructions for the steps. With your basket right sides out, place the first carry strap on top of the front of the basket with the raw edges along the top of the basket and the length of the strap towards the bottom of the basket. Pin straps to the bag and then with your sewing machine stay stitch the straps in place. Repeat on the back of your basket with the second strap. Place your bag exterior and lining wrong sides together. Place the basket lining inside the basket exterior and match the seams on the side. Pin and stitch the lining to the inside of the basket's exterior with a 1/4 inch seam. To prepare the top section of the basket, first measure the top of your basket and cut your fabric E pieces to the correct size. Place the fabric E pieces right sides together and clip. Stitch the ends, which are the shorter sides, together using a 1/4 inch seam. Repeat on the other side. This will form a tube. Iron the seams open. Place the binding on the outside of the basket, right sides together. Match the raw edges of the binding with the raw edges of the top of the basket exterior. The raw edge of the binding should be pointing towards the bottom of the basket. Pin together and stitch along the top using a 1/4 inch seam. Fold up the top section of the basket. Starting anywhere, fold the binding fabric in half and then fold in half again, making sure you fold it just over your seam stitching. Continue clipping your binding all the way around your basket. Turn the basket inside out. This will help the binding be taut. Starting anywhere, sew the binding to the basket just inside the folded edge of the binding. If you want, change your bobbin thread to match your backing. Turn your basket right side out and give it a good iron. Be careful if you use PU or cork. Your beautiful Easter basket is now ready to be filled with chocolatey treats. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this month's sew along, and remember to share all your fantastic projects on our Sweet Pea Facebook group. See you next time.